I still have to meet you on Friday. I just remembered. Are we still good for that?
We are.
At, it's at your office.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So good. All right. Good. All right. For those of you jumping in, let us know what city, what state you're in. I'm in California. Jake's in California, Southern California, and Jennifer is in California. In fact, Jennifer's our attorney for Lab Code Agents and for a Brilliant Tribe and for a bunch of other stuff. And I ask her questions all day. So, Jennifer, not a better person for me to ask about what we do next. But first, let's do a proper intro. What do you do so people understand?
Yeah, so I'm a real estate attorney. My background is I was an escrow officer, so I did transactional real estate for 15 years before I went to law school and became an attorney. So my focus is representing businesses in the real estate space, whether it's an escrow company, a title company, a broker, an agent, right? An investor. The people who are in real estate are my clients, and we help them navigate the legal issues that come up in the world of real estate.
Well, you've been really busy then.
We are busy. There's no shortage of things to do.
Everybody's asking, like, what happens next? There's a lot of uncertainty. Everyone knows what the proposed settlement at this point says. The
Right.
thing that's a little uncertain is that what happens next? Does the DOJ file like an amicus brief and say, "Hey, this is what we think," right?
Right.
But or do they force our hands? But more importantly, how do we proceed right now?
Hmm.
And what do you think happens next? Two big separate questions, but
Right.
where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with what I see as an opportunity, right?
Okay,
So that
perfect.
really needs to be where the the proactive planning real estate professional is going with this, right? Because that's that's the next step, right? So we're in a time of change, and real estate is in a bigger time of change than anyone, but the whole world is in a time of change, right?
True.
Whether it's the economy, interest rates, right, fire insurance, right, whatever you want to talk about, homeowners and an ADU and what you can own and what you can't. The world is in a time of change, and real estate is seeing it in layer after layer. So the Missouri case and the DOJ is one piece of that. And that piece really goes to who you are as a professional and where you're going to go and how you take your profession to the next level, because that's what this is. This is an opportunity to take ourselves to the next level. What I've been saying for 10 years to real estate agents, if they're representing a buyer, is you should have a buyer broker agreement. I've been talking about a buyer broker agreement and the need to contract for a decade. And the pushback has always been nobody else does it, no one will sign it, right? All of this self-doubt, I'll put it, within the
Yeah.
industry, right, of our worth, right, and the willingness of a buyer to engage with us. I can
True.
tell you as an attorney, no one gets my legal services unless they enter into a contract with me and we agree on how I'm going to get compensated and how the process is going to work and what the expectations are. All of those things that are part of a normal contract and a normal business relationship haven't been happening for real estate agents representing buyers. The result is that you have a whole class of disputes called procuring cause, right? Who actually represented that buyer? That doesn't exist in any other industry. There's no such thing as procuring cause in law, right?
That's
Like everybody knows
very
who's
clear.
the lawyer, right? And what
Yeah.
we're doing, right? But as an industry, again, this really to me goes to a lack of confidence, a lack of
Mm.
willingness to um, put ourselves out there and explain, articulate our value, our unique selling proposition, and what we bring to the table. You guys are worth the money that you make, right? That's not the question, right? And if you don't get that and you can't articulate that and you don't believe that, you're in the wrong industry, right? But if
Yeah.
you do know that and believe that, then like every other type of sales, you're going to have to figure out how to articulate that in order to get those buyers to sign the buyer broker agreement and work with you and determine the right way to represent them and explaining the value you bring to that transaction. So like a listing presentation that we do with the sellers, right? We're able to do that with sellers. Why we've been so reluctant and resistant to do it with buyers has always been a something I didn't understand. Well, now it doesn't matter. You don't have a choice. If you're going to represent buyers, you're going to learn how to do a buyer presentation and explain your value and get them to agree that you're worth the money that they're going to spend or the seller's going to spend. The reality is someone's going to pay you guys, right? Whether it's the seller or the buyer, right? And it does go into the calculations of what the price is, no matter who's paying for it, right?
Yeah.
But so then we need to be able to articulate that and show that. And the more that we do that and build those scripts, build that plan and build our marketing position, the sooner you do it and are ready to take on the next phase, the better you're going to be.
I
Right.
love that. So for those of you who are just joined a little bit late, Jennifer Felton is an attorney in the state of California. She's actually our attorney for Lab Coat Agents and a Brilliant Tribe. So thought I'd bring her in to talk about what the opportunities are with the proposed settlement. I think that is probably the number one opportunity that we learn to treat this aspect of our business, representing the buyers,
Mm-hmm.
um, as an opportunity for growth to connect and create more transparency. I love that piece.
Yep.
That's a big piece, but I have a question about that. How are you going to see it enforced? Because the number one question I'm getting is like, that's cool, it's great, but I mean, who's going to be checking? And and if the buyer says, I don't want to work with you, is
Right.
there a document of saying, hey, it's done? And if not, how do we go to court? What do you see happening here?
So these things actually already exist, right? They have, for us in California at least, right? We have a very strong state um, California Association of Realtors, right? And their forms and documents are a benchmark of real estate in California. So there's a buyer broker agreement. It didn't just get created, right? It's been there for a
Sure.
very long time. And
Yeah.
there's a termination of buyer broker agreement. That form already exists as well. And as part of that, it talks about so just like when you have a listing, right? If you cancel a listing, you're going to, as part of that cancellation, determine when you're going to be entitled to a commission, right? So if I cancel a listing, right, they decide they weren't happy, but if any of those buyers that I brought to the table end up buying, I'm still going to get paid, right? That's traditionally how a cancellation works. And there's a form to document which properties, which buyers would be involved. There's a same form for a buyer broker agreement. So a buyer broker agreement can be for one property, right? So maybe we're just showing, they just want to see one property and they agree to pay us on that one property, like an exclusive listing, right? Or it can
Yep.
say, I'm going to represent them for a certain amount of time. Then if it cancels or it ends, any property I showed them would be part of that package, right? Of ones that I would get paid on if they end up buying on those transactions. But this all goes to contract, right? And how we document. And that's why the contract is so important and why
Yeah.
I've always been yelling about the need for a contract, because I can't
Mm.
enforce a contract if I don't have a contract,
Yeah.
right? And commissions in California, at least, it requires a written contract to be enforceable, right? So
Mm.
in order to have, that's why listing agreements are such a big deal,
Yeah.
right? They're enforceable. And usually the seller was paying, so we weren't worried about the buyer side. But now where the buyer is going to be involved in some way, shape, or form in this process,
Hmm.
we're going to need to have those contracts. And I can tell you, like, again, in California with procuring cause, um, there is a presumption that you're the procuring cause if you have a buyer broker agreement, right? That contract creates a presumption that you're the person who put that deal together and are entitled to the commissions.
Yeah, very true. I like that. Yeah, you can't enforce a contract if none exists. So
Right.
let's go back to the basics of that. I like that. So then as we move forward, I'm looking now, here are the conversations I'm having with
Yes.
uh, sellers and buyers.
Right.
They're bringing it up, at least in Southern California. I don't have to bring it up. Any conversation, they're bringing it up.
Correct.
And the conversations are like, so now we don't have to, seller side, we don't have to pay the buyer's agent.
Hmm.
That's one. And on the buyer's side, they're like, how does this work? Do we have to pay you now? Right. So there's a lot of ambiguity as to how this works
Yep.
from the consumer side. Do
Hmm.
you think that it's going to cause a compression on the buyer agent commission, or do you see it not affecting it as much as people think?
Well, we've already been seeing a compression on commissions, right, over the last decades, right? So I've
Yep.
been in this industry, right? I was an escrow officer 30 years ago. When I was doing escrow 30 years ago, it was 6%, right? Across the board. You didn't see a deal. It was very rare that we saw a deal that didn't have 6%. I haven't seen a 6% deal in the last 10 years, right? In
Yep.
Southern California, our average is significantly closer to 5% today, right? So there
Yep.
has already been a compression or a contraction in commissions. But when you think about prices and what's gone up with pricing, you're still making more, from dollar to dollar, though the percentage is going down, right?
Yep.
So I do believe that the numbers will continue to go down. I think when this all shakes out in a few years, we'll be closer to 4%. I think that the
Okay.
average deal will end up in that range. And how that shakes out between the buyer and the seller, like it is now, right, is still, negotiated and deal by deal, right? But I think that's where we're going, at least in California, with pricing and competition and all the factors. Understanding, the brokerage model here has some real challenges, right? Because
Yep.
the brokerages have given the commissions to the agents, right? So, I mean, we're in a time of change, which is brokerage in general, of whether a brokerage can survive and how they survive and how they make money in a
True.
tightening commission market, right?
Yeah.
Again, when I was doing escrow 30 years ago, it was like 70-30. The agent got 70%, the brokerage got 30%. That was a traditional commission disbursement. I haven't
True.
seen a commission disbursement like that in 20 years either,
That's
right?
a good point. Yeah, I guess that the compression on the brokerage side
Oh, yeah,
has has also happened.
it
Interesting.
is. And that's
Uh,
why they're selling ancillary services and pushing all the other, they have
yeah,
to, right? Because they're not making money on the commissions themselves, right?
interesting. All right, so let's say we do end up in California closer to uh, a 4%
Mhm.
ish average. What do you think the opportunity is there as a real estate agent? What are we looking at?
Right. Well, in my mind, the biggest thing is you need to run your business. Real estate agents are small business owners, right? So first of all, that needs to be your mindset that you're a small business owner, and then you need to
Mhm.
run your business like a business, right? So if I'm going to make 2% from the buyer on the transaction, I'm going to sit down with that buyer and I'm going to say, these are the services I'm going to provide for that 2%, right? And you document what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and then you abide by that. So you don't let them we deal with it in law too. If I do something flat fee, there's a concept of creep, right? Where I agreed to do one thing and then they'll be like, oh, but I need this and I need this and I need this, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to say, no, our contract said I was going to do these three things. I can do those other three things, but I get compensated for those other three things as well,
It's true.
right?
Yeah.
So that goes again, it goes into having a contract, having agreement, setting proper expectations, and then managing that. So if I agree to 2% and it means I agree to show you 10 properties, right? And that I will work 10 properties with you, right? And then when they're at the 50th property, you and we still haven't
Yeah.
made an offer, right? And are we, those are like we are going to see shifts, right? In how we do this and what we do, and building those, what are you worth? That's where this starts, right? What are you worth? And what is your time worth? You guys should calculate what your dollar average, what your hour is worth, right? And then how many hours are you going to spend on any given project? And then
Hmm.
you base your pricing based upon that, right? That's what I do,
I
right?
like.
So, understanding that and then putting the pieces in place to make that happen. This should be done on the listing side too, right? Not just on the buyer's side, right? You guys put a lot of time, money, and effort into a listing. Now, granted, recently, most of them fly off the shelves because we don't have any inventory, but that's an unusual market, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes into listing and selling a property, time, effort, right? And resources. And so again, helping the consumer understand that, managing it on your end so that you're running a business. You can't make up for losses with volume. Right?
No, no. And then you start losing that self-worth if you do it in
Correct.
volume, right? So
There's
I understand that. You made a good point there. Actually, I'd love for everyone listening in, as you're thinking of what the opportunities are
Mhm.
in this, is to outline, similar to what you said, it's like outline what it means to work with you. Like,
Right.
what are they getting? Because the moment people start asking for things outside of the scope,
Mhm.
that's where you're going to have to say, well, hold on a second. How much time does that equate outside of
Right.
my scope?
Right.
And is it something that I'm willing to do
Mhm.
because now my value has gone down?
Right.
So I think, Jennifer, I think you're right on that. And I also think that over the next, it's going to be a while. So I agree with you. Over the next 2 years or a little bit longer, we're going to see what becomes normal. And
Correct.
I don't know that we know what that looks like yet, right? So
Well, I would say
when
we
it
don't know what that looks like. And, part of, we all kind of have, the Missouri case has a proposed settlement. And though most of us are kind of not necessarily happy with where that went, we kind of at least have baselines. We know
yeah.
what's coming. The problem is that last week, the Department of Justice case got reopened, right? So, understanding that this all started with the government action, not with private lawsuits, right? The Department of Justice sued the National Association of Realtors and went after them relative to certain practices, right? Those ideas got into the heads of class action lawyers, which created the Missouri case and others, and now has resulted in that settlement. Um, but that DOJ case is now back in play. And whether the DOJ will get involved in the Missouri case or not, I actually don't think they will, honestly. But it doesn't mean that more things don't change, right? So understand there are 4 changes that were implemented by NAR as a result of the DOJ settlement. Now there's potentially 2 core changes as a result of the Missouri settlement, right? Well, what comes next is probably some more changes because of DOJ, right? So I think that we're still going to see more shifting,
So
right?
what do you think are those changes that are on the table from what you're seeing?
It's still way too early to know. The DOJ had issued a subpoena to request information from NAR, which is what we've been fighting over. So now that subpoena is back on the table, which means NAR has to respond. A subpoena is a request for information. NAR has to provide that information to the DOJ, and then DOJ has to analyze it and then come back with this is what we want. I do think that the things with the Missouri settlement will go to some of the concerns with the DOJ, but I don't,
Mhm.
again, my crystal ball isn't that clear on where we're going, but I do think as an industry, the ideas of transparency and clear communication and helping our consumers understand the costs and pieces to the puzzle of their transaction are all going to be on the table as things that need to be dealt with. I mean, I don't agree with the DOJ or the Missouri case as far as what happened and how they've played out. It wouldn't have been how I would have done it if I were the judge, but but the baseline concepts of us as a real estate industry not doing a good enough job of articulating and giving people clear communication about our compensation is real, right? We haven't done a good job with that. And shifting
Sure.
that, the sooner you're doing that, the better you're going to be to mitigate risks of lawsuits and building the better relationships with your clients, right? When you look at public opinion polls of like professionals and how consumers rate professionals, you want to know who's at the bottom of the list?
Who?
Used car salesmen, attorneys, and realtors. All 3 of us as professionals are at the very bottom of consumer confidence and belief in us as professionals. We
Mm.
have created those perceptions as an industry, not you or me individually, but as an industry. And as industries, we have to dig ourselves out of those holes, right? And
True.
this case is an exemplification of that lack of consumer confidence and trust in our professional ability. And the sooner we start shifting that, the better we're going to be personally, professionally, and with our clients.
Yeah, very true, very true. Stacy says she disagrees. You get what you pay for. She does really well. Stacy, I agree with you.
Mhm.
But remember, we're talking to a larger real estate agent population where we have to take the average, not the outliers. You are an outlier, right? I am an outlier. So we have
And
to,
you're absolutely, if you're willing to provide the services and have clients willing to pay that, that is great, right? Not every attorney charges the same amount, right? There are attorneys who are super cheap and they provide that level, right? A baseline level of service. And there are attorneys in LA who charge $2,000 an hour, right? And someone agrees to pay that. They
yeah.
are able to articulate the value in that as well. So I'm not saying you have to change or decrease your value. You need to articulate your value and find the right
Mhm.
people who are willing to pay you what you are worth, right?
True. All right. Opportunity number one,
Yep.
it allows us to create more transparency for ourselves and saying, what do
Correct.
we actually offer? It creates clarity in our business.
Yep.
So, opportunity number one, we start treating this, remember, the average agent, we start treating it more like a business, right?
Mhm.
That's number one.
Yep.
Number two, I think we have an opportunity to, I don't know that we can go further down the ladder and beat the used car salesman, right? As a real estate industry. So I see it as a possible opportunity to go
Mhm.
up the ladder and
Yes.
say, hey, now we are communicating more.
Mhm.
We're becoming more transparent if it wasn't transparent enough in the past. And because of that, you're going to trust us more. Because look at the media. The media is destroying the real estate agent right now,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So
And
part of that, like you said, falls on us.
it's not you, right? It's not the people who are on this call, right? The people who are taking this seriously, but there's enough of those looky-loos and, self-interested people, right? Like that's what the problem, right? Is when the agents are focused on themselves and not on the client service, that's where you have the problems and that's where you get the reputation. Again, attorneys do it, right? It as an industry, those people who focus on themselves and not the consumer are the ones who give us a bad rap.
All right, I agree. Now, Jennifer, you have some of the coolest clients in California. I know because you're like, oh, I help them, I help them. Like, damn, who don't you help? So, what are the top teams,
Mhm.
top brokerages doing right now
Mhm.
to adjust that we can learn from?
Right. So it really is putting the right scripts and processes and policies in place to manage this shift. Right. So the the teams who can brand around this and take this as a way to reach out, talk to clients, and help them understand. I mean, cooperating commission, in my opinion, is still a really good thing. Right. So on that listing side, you're going to adjust your listing presentation because before, right, offering cooperating commission was just part of the deal. It wasn't something we particularly articulated, right? Now we need to learn how to articulate why offering cooperating commission is important, right? And so on the listing side, building those conversations, again, explaining what value those agents can bring and why, you know, the more you offer, the bigger your pool is going to be, right? Of potential buyers. That's just the real world. And the more buyers we have, the better opportunity for the seller to maximize the value of their property, right? So again, but in a sentence, I could articulate why you want to give cooperating commission. You got to learn how to do that. Each piece of this puzzle, you need to learn how to articulate and spell out. And so building the scripts, having the conversations, practicing with your team. When you do get the objections, right? Taking them back to your team and saying, okay, so this is the objection I got. How should we respond when this question or this issue comes up in the future, right? And so building that, and again, putting together, I'm a big believer in systems processes. So a checklist, right? And a process for how, what am I going to do? How am I going to articulate my value? So when I was an escrow officer, one of the things I did was every week I had a checklist, which we all had checklists, right? In escrow. I had a checklist of all the things I needed to complete the transaction. And, again, this was 30 years ago. Every week on Friday, I would fax the checklist to the real estate agents, right? So the real estate agents would have an update of what I had and what I still needed on any given transaction, right? It was a quick, simple thing. I already had the checklist. I didn't have to create it. I just had to take a minute to throw it in the fax machine, right? Agents loved it that they were getting an update and knew what was going on. So your process should include a daily or a weekly or whatever the cadence of accountability is with your client as to what you're doing for them, right? So that they, instead of, how often do I hear, oh, I have this agent, but he's not doing anything, or she's not,
All the time.
right? That is a huge complaint against agents, right? So if whether it's an email or a text, whatever mode of communication, giving them a regular update on what you're doing and how you've moved their, tried to move their deal forward, the better, right? How hard is that, right? You just build it into your CRM, right? Assuming you have a CRM.
Yeah, very
If you don't
true.
have a CRM, that's the first step, right?
I like that.
I do this as a lawyer because what the number one complaint against lawyers is?
The same thing as the agents, no communication.
Failure to communicate,
Yeah. Figures, yeah, same thing.
right? The number one complaint is that the attorney doesn't return my call, right? So,
Wait, that's the same one as a real estate agent.
yep. That the state bar puts out a report, and that's always number one. So return calls, and again, that's a reactive, right? Not returning a call is a failure to react, but to run a business, you should be being proactive, right? So building proactive systems to manage your listings and your buyers is how you're going to, again, keep them happy. They're going to feel like you're doing something for them, right? Because again, they don't know what you're doing, right? And unless you tell them what you're doing.
Yeah, very true. They don't know. And it's a
Yep.
lack of communication. So I took what you just said. You said, when I asked you, hey, what are the top teams, top brokerages doing? You said they're putting the right scripts in place, they're putting the right processes in place,
Yep.
and putting the right policies in place.
Correct.
This is how I interpreted it, just to simplify it. Uh, we're teaching our agents, or we're teaching ourselves exactly what to say, right? Number one, what to say, what we do so that the communication is clear. It's like, this is what we
Right.
do, your checklist, boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
And how we function and how we do it.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, okay, you just simplified it for me, Jennifer. Now I've got it right here. What we say, what we do, and how we do it.
Well, and so for me, right, I have a team just like you guys, right? I have 11 people who work for me, right? Which means I'm not doing all the legal work that's coming out of my office, right? But I'm the rainmaker, right? I'm like you. I'm out there, with the relationship. So when a client comes in, part of my conversation with them is, okay, great, you've joined our team. And this person on the team does this, and this person on the team does this, and this person on the team does this, so that not everybody is asking me, where's my stuff, right? And who's working,
Yes,
right?
all the
So,
time.
right. So you build these teams and you help the clients know who on the team is the point person for whatever it is. And you build those relationships. You give them the point and let them take it and manage that. And then you just supervise for when an issue comes up so that you can mitigate and resolve whatever comes up. You should not, if you're running a team, you should not be out there showing properties in most cases, right? You should not be, looking at the TC's checklist of whether everything's ready to go for us. That's not your job. That's not the highest and best use of your time and energy. So again, going back to what am I worth, and not just me, but my team and who on my team. So we have a form that we use called the division of functions, and it lists all the different jobs of our firm. And every year I ask my staff to say, what things of the jobs are they working on? Because I want the highest paid people doing the stuff that's producing the most revenue, right? And putting the right person doing the right job. If I'm doing bookkeeping, something's wrong, right? Someone else should be doing that. If
Nice.
I'm answering the phone, something's wrong, right? Someone else should be doing that, right? So again, that processes, systems, all of that is just imperative. You're running a business.
Yeah, I love that. I think the more you put things into place, like you're saying, when
Mhm,
you're hiring,
mhm.
especially now with this is a whole different topic, but especially now with AI, you can start building a bigger team and
Absolutely.
leverage tech a lot better. But
Mhm.
here's why I love what you said. Sometimes when we think of a team as putting in a buyer's agent, a listing agent,
Right.
but what I'm seeing is an opportunity in the near future to do more of what you said and say, well, why can't we plug in technology
Mhm.
to serve those purposes of communicating with the client, all of these different things that we're doing and how we're doing them.
Yep.
So it alleviates me to focus on the things that I need to be doing, not bookkeeping, right?
Right.
Not emailing the client and being like, hey, this is what we did yesterday and today,
Tech
but
can
more
do
like
that
create
for you.
relationships.
Absolutely. Right. It's not me sticking a piece of paper in a fax machine today. Right. Your CRM, if you have it built properly, will be able to do those updates automatically without you even doing anything if you set up the system properly.
That's very true. Very true. See, that's another opportunity. As we start looking for things that are coming our way this way, we start changing the way we look at things. So
Oh, yeah.
I, lo- all right, Jennifer, then last thing, what are you doing to prepare for this different world that we're heading into?
Well, lawyers are living through a shift as well, right? As the world changes. So, you guys are scared of buyers now, right? And getting
Yeah.
them to agree to pay you. Lawyers are scared of AI, right? And
Yeah.
artificial intelligence. And there's this fear that technology can replace us, right? And look,
Yeah.
we've been seeing that in real estate. It used to be that they had to come to you to find properties for sale, right? 10 years ago, if I wanted to buy a house, the only way I could do it is go find a real estate agent who had the access to the MLS where the data was, which wasn't public at the time, right? Technology shifted that, and all that data is now public. So one of the big complaints I hear from realtors is that buyer found a house before I could show them one, right?
Mhm.
So again, leveraging technology, using technology. I use AI every day in my business. AI is not a threat to me. It's a tool
Mhm.
that I can leverage to do things better. And learning how to do that, embracing it, embracing change, right? Which is a humans don't,
Yeah.
it's part of the deal, but we hate it, right? But embracing it and using it and staying on top of whatever's shifting and being able to maximize that for your, if you're going to be a first mover, is going to do really well, right? So there's a life cycle of any new technology, right? And the first movers are like the first 7%, right? The first 7% of someone to embrace it almost always do very well with the technology. If you're on the back end of that, the technology is replacing you, right? And so you
No.
need to be on that front end, and whatever's coming in, whether it's a tech issue or a business shift, right? Learning about it, embracing it, and modifying to adapt to it. That's what I'm doing, right? So,
Oh, well,
yep.
listen, that's what we're doing too, which I love. And that's why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I outlined some things which I love. You just simplified it for me. I'm like, oh, this is exactly how we move forward, right? So anything else you want to add, Jennifer? I'd love to have you back as this progresses.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's shifting really fast. So it's definitely something that, every month or two, an update would be helpful because, again, with the DOJ back in play, we really don't know yet what that means.
True, true.
So,
And let's
and
just keep an eye on it.
and the more that we're working on and building these systems, the better.
True. Very true. Systems, processes, policies, and how to say and
Mhm.
how to articulate the changes that are happening to the consumer.
Correct.
I like it.
Exactly.
Jennifer, thank you so much. How do people reach you if they have questions for you?
So the easiest way to find me is my website for our firm. Our firm is called RELAW, RELAW, and then the letters APC.com. And I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn and YouTube, all under Jennifer Felton Esquire. So you can find me on any of those channels.
Perfect. It's RELAW,
APC.
APC.com. All right, put the link there. There
Perfect.
it is. I have it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This was a good one. I loved it. I learned some things. Jennifer, thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Tristan. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.